Okay, great. Okay, I'm going to call to order this meeting of the Anchorage Assembly Public Health and Safety Committee meeting. It is September 4th at 11:01 a.m. Let's just start by calling roll. Do we want to start with those in the room? Mr. Littlefield?
Mark Littlefield.
Anna Brawley.
Cameron Perez Verdia. And on the phone, looks like we have a few people. If you could just acknowledge you're on there. Mr. Salt? Mr. Johnson?
Here.
Mr. Rivera?
Here.
Ms. Zolotel?
Yes.
Great. Okay, and just as a reminder, if you're on the phone, if you want to get in the queue, just send me a text and we'll create a space for you to speak.
Mr. Salt's here.
Oh, thanks. Mr. Salt's here as well. Well, thanks everybody for being
Also,
here.
Mr. Constant.
Oh, Mr. Constant is here as well. Wonderful. We've got a full table of name tags. Okay, so just a few items. I'm going to add an item to the agenda if there's no objection, and that is a discussion on a resolution expressing support for the stand-up of Alaska Center for Treatment by October 2025. This is submitted by Assembly Vice Chair Zolotel, and we'll create a space on the agenda. We'll add this to new business. If there's no objection. Also, I think that was the only addition. Any other additions to the agenda? Nope, seeing none. Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Zolotel.
thank you. I'm only going to be able to stay with you until about 11:35 today.
Okay, great. Oh, it is on the, I see. Okay, why don't we have you go first then? And let's put in front of the agenda, and that'll make sure you have plenty of time to discuss it.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. Well, let's start with that. And I know that Claire's here as well. So she sounds like that she worked on it as well. But Ms. Zolotel, if you want to, I'll go ahead and give you the floor if you want to present the resolution.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this resolution stems out of a meeting had with the health department that in a prior conversation that the body had that the RFI was going to go out around operations for the Alaska Center for Treatment. Those results from the RFI came back in. The health department shared them with us. And so the idea now is to look at that feedback and to make sure that we're providing appropriate guidance for the request for proposals based on what providers told us is kind of the reality on the ground and what we need to accomplish with the Alaska Center for Treatment, both as to the consent decree, but also making sure it meets our policy priorities. A lot has happened since the MLMP consent decree went into effect. And so this is that opportunity. We've shelled out a resolution that really reflects what's from the RFI, but wanted to have space for discussion if there are questions about what we learned in the RFI or if the health department did. Or if there are additional ideas or things we need to put on the table to discuss in providing that policy guidance. Thanks.
Thank you. Claire, do you have anything to add to that? On the bottom, there's a switch. There you go.
That's about it. We took some past ARs on the topic and some language from the RCA agreement to put together this resolution. And then we have shown it with Ms. Rash and Ms. Liebersbach from the health department. And so the resolve section is just empty, and we're hoping to fill that part in with the discussion today. And we did put some of the notes from the RFI that could be the basis of your resolve section.
Thank you. Kim, would you mind coming up? Thanks. So just so I understand the content, so this is recommendations for the health department prior to them submitting their RFP, based on past.
Ms. Altel, do you want to answer that question?
Sure, thanks. Yeah, so based on past direction we gave, but also lessons learned. The last time an RFP went out for the Alaska Center for Treatment, there were no bidders. And we are staring a little bit at a deadline. And as I said as well, we want to make sure that whatever RFP goes out is from a shared policy perspective, so that when the contract comes forward and explains what's in that contract, we aren't unaware as to what was asked for, and is being now presented as what would turn on the Alaska Center for Treatment. Under the consent decree, there's quite a bit of latitude about what can be turned on. So we think this pre-work is important.
Thank you. Ms. Rash, will you introduce yourself for the record? And I'd love to hear any, have you had a chance to review this?
Yes, Kimberly Rash, Anchorage Health Department. I did. And I had shared the RCA, and so a lot of the initial language in there is straight from that document. And then some of the feedback at the end is from a synopsis that we provided, Claire and Assembly Vice Chair Zalatel. And so I can kind of go over some of that feedback that we received or that I presented, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think it'd be helpful. I guess I'm just curious. Does this provide clear guidance for you in terms of your work, and does this? I'm also just curious about why we didn't get any bidders the last time, and whether this feels like it's a helpful tool in terms of refining that process and ensuring that it's a more successful bidding process.
Yeah, so I believe, and I wasn't here during that time of the original RFP for that, but from what I have heard, it was because there was a lot of influx with the Medicaid waivers coming out. Also with the potential administration change, there was some worry about that facility and the use of that facility. So that is the feedback that I have received in regards to potentially why no one had proposed anything for that particular RFP process. With the current RFI, we were really excited. We did receive 5 responses to the RFI, which is a request for information. And so really, I think that kind of lays the foundation and the framework for what we're kind of looking at. And that's kind of what Member Zalatel had just mentioned, is really what are people seeing within our community? What are some of the barriers or roadblocks that they might be experiencing? I think if there is additional feedback that can be provided in this resolution, it will also really help tailor the RFP for the health department, because obviously the last thing we want is to put something out in the streets that doesn't meet the expectations of either the community, the administration, or the assembly. We want to make sure it's very targeted and that it's done right the first time. And so some of the information that's in there now is helpful. I think really just maybe digesting what's in there and then providing the feedback and then presenting it as a finalized document would be additionally helpful for the health department. We did some of the key takeaways that we saw with the RFIs is that the respondents' experience was ranging from 1.5 to 10 years of experience in providing substance use disorder and behavioral health services and billing Medicaid and other third-party payers for those services. The need that they saw most within Anchorage is better substance use disorder behavioral health system, connectivity, and collaboration, including better supports for individuals who are trying to navigate the system to the right level of service. Providers who have both inpatient and outpatient services at the same site, including residential treatment services and recovery residents through transitional housing. Incorporation of that idea of having transitional housing, the majority of the respondents proposed that the main operator for the Alaska Center treatment would be a substance use disorder service provider who then would partner, subcontract, or sublease with a transitional housing provider. Some of the challenges that they see for the Alaska Center for Treatment, the Medicaid reimbursement rate being too low to sustain services, and then the current state of the Golden Lion property, and the potential work and funding needed to make that building usable for the operator. And regarding funding, that was one of the questions that we asked through the RFI process was, how long or how much funding and how long would it take for you to get to a point where you would be self-sufficient? And the fastest any respondent said that they could make the Alaska Center for Treatment operational self-sustaining was 24 months. And so that feedback was really critical because I think, looking at our budget and looking at opioid remediation funds and kind of seeing where that capacity would lie. But I think overall, having as much feedback from the body is going to be helpful before we push out this RFP. One of the questions I was asked recently is, is there a deadline for that RFP? And, I had stated in the past that we were hoping to get this out in fall of this year. But again, that's not a hard deadline for the health department. It was just something that we had put in place so that we could kind of have a goal that we're going towards. But if it takes a little bit longer, it takes a little bit longer because, again, it needs to be right to garner the most amount of proposers from our community.
Thank you. I had a question, but actually the member, Mr. Johnson, are you no longer on the phone? Okay, I think he had to go. I have a question for you. I think I'd asked this in a previous meeting, but the type of service that we're looking at providing there, and whether there was a specific type of service based on the current need within Anchorage or based on the requirements of the agreement. And I'd love to hear an update on that. And then the third piece is really about the type of service and that related to the sort of surrounding area. And we heard early on in this process, there was concern from the surrounding community about traffic, about people crossing the street, about how that would impact the surrounding area, and whether the type of inpatient, outpatient type of treatment, type of folks that are going to be there would impact that surrounding area. So I'm curious specifically about the type of treatment and what that will mean in terms of the not only the surrounding area, but meeting the requirements that we have.
Yeah, great question. So in the RCA kind of specifies a few types of services under that decree. So crisis stabilization, transitional housing, inpatient services, outpatient services. So any combination of those or one of those. And so one of the things that we thought, in having conversations is to provide a aspect of transitional housing coupled with inpatient and outpatient treatment services. And so that's still kind of the course that we're running off of, only because we see that two other entities are currently working on standing up a crisis stabilization centers, one through South Central Foundation and one through Providence. And so really tapping into those other needs that are still within the consent decree. In regards to the surrounding community and area, I don't know if I have an answer for that, only because, one of the things, that I have not done is I have not reached out to that community or that community council to get any feedback. I do know that currently, there are individuals staying at the Golden Lion location, and there have not been any substantial concerns with individuals there within the community. There haven't been, I know one of the concerns that you just mentioned was individuals walking across the very busy streets there, the highway. We haven't seen any concerns there with that aspect. And so I'm hopeful that, really having a provider and whatever guidelines that they set in place for that facility, I think would continue to work well at that location. But
Thanks.
I can't tell you for sure.
Thanks. I have a few people in the queue. First, Mr. Constant, and then Miss Brawley.
Yeah, thanks. I actually now have two questions. First question is, what's the timeline on the resolution to get it before us and pass? I don't know what the plan is on that. And the second piece is, has the department looked through this kind of review at the potential of using the building as a kind of an asset to be transferred to the potential bidder after a certain period of time, like either sold or kind of leased to own. So we no longer have it as a liability once the program is standing up and operating.
Ms. Zalatil, do you want to speak to the timeline for the resolution?
Sure. So we first wanted to hear from you all today. We could have headed towards the addendum for the 10th, but we can, if there is going to be substantial input from the committee or members through legislative services, we can bring it for the second meeting in September. Not really wanting to push it much further than that, knowing we are working toward an October 2025 deadline and that there are many pieces, including a capital side to renovations attached to this. So really wanting to give as much of a runway as possible for the health department to get out the RFP, get responses back, and make sure all of those other component parts are moving.
Thanks. And then do you want to speak to the second question?
Yeah. So in regards to the transferring of the building as an asset, I have not had those conversations, but I can definitely engage with the administration and get their feedback on that.
Mr. Constant?
Thank you, because there have been some folks who reached out and asked that question to me. And why is at some point that building could become a very valuable asset for leveraging for investments, for loans, for an operator, but we'd want to make sure it has proper reversionary clauses and meets our needs. And so I just want to make sure that that's part of the conversation.
Thanks. Okay.
Also, it's worth noting that I am a treatment provider and my company is not in any way providing anything in response to this. So I would just make that disclosure as a way of letting the body know I don't believe I have a conflict.
Thanks. Next up, Ms. Brawley and then Ms. Zalatil.
Yeah, thanks. Just in terms of general feedback, and I appreciate the resolution and thinking about this. I know we've been talking about it, but it's that deadline is a hard deadline. I know. I guess my 2 cents would be I support what's in these bullets, and I appreciate the other work. I know, for example, Medicaid reimbursement rate is too low, so that's going to be a challenge. That's a challenge for every provider, it seems like. I do appreciate that it's calling out substance use disorder treatment and not just mental health services, because I think obviously a lot of folks have both co-occurring for various reasons. But I think that's important to state because I know that is a challenge. That's been a challenge to have enough providers. And then lastly, I'll say I do strongly support the housing component. I think we've talked about this before, when some folks say treatment, they think hospital level inpatient treatment, and there's an entire spectrum, and especially low, there's really effective services on the lowish end of that spectrum. But one of the biggest challenges is staying housed and being able to maintain sobriety or maintain recovery or whatever it looks like for that person. So I think recognizing that, I think we're not trying to create a hospital or an inpatient center, but we are trying to create a place that people can successfully go into recovery. And so housing has to be a part of that. Thanks.
Thanks. Ms. Zalatil?
Thank you. On the neighborhood, as many of you may remember, there was considerable neighborhood concerns around the purchase of the Golden Lion Hotel in the time intervening and even turning it on as housing. Myself representing that area, we haven't heard those concerns. The previous concerns came from the Homeowners Association, which is the Geneva Woods Homeowners Association. Haven't heard anything from them. Know they're aware of it. And then Rogers Park Community Council has not raised any concerns. Tudor area, the other community council for that location, has not been meeting of late and has not had quorum to take any action, but it also has not come up as a concern. Finally, haven't heard any additional concerns from the preschool nearby at the Jewish Center there either. Previously had been a concern, but nothing since it's turned on as housing.
Thank you, Ms. Zalatil. Next up, I have Mr. Rivera.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So a couple of things. One, to piggyback a little bit on what Member Zolotel was stating. I think a lot of the initial concerns that the constituents that Member Zolotel and I represent were based on a misconceived notion that this facility would be something other than a treatment facility. So I would take whatever concerns that may still be lingering in people's minds from some time ago with a grain of salt. I will say the only concerns that I've heard recently have been primarily around the edifice of the building and some possible constructions or renovations or upgrades, and why some of that is taking so long. So it's been primarily more of a concern around look, and rather than anything truly of substance, in my opinion. With regard to the resolution, so as I'm looking at the resolved statements, I appreciate this list that's on here, and just wanting to dig into these just a little bit more. I can understand how the first 3 bullet points speak to something that provides good guidance to the health department to make sure that that's included in the RFP, and that anyone who is bidding on the RFP sort of understands what we're looking for. On the last, and on the last 2, and I guess really 3 bullet points, would like to hear a little bit more from the sponsor and the crafter of this resolution, just to understand a little bit about what kind of guidance that we're seeking to give to the health department on these particular bullet points, so that they are helpful to whoever is thinking of submitting to the RFP.
Yes, Ms. Ross.
This is Claire Ross, crafter of this document. I just pulled the notes from the RFI and stuck them in there as a conversation starter, so you all could have that information. It's not really written in a form where that's what your resolves are. So I'm hoping this conversation today will give me guidance of what to put in there. And so it sounds like I should craft the first 3 bullets to fit into that section, and then maybe the other 3 are conversation starters, and then I could add to. I think it's really important, if members have stuff they want to add to this list, that the health department isn't considering that gets in there as well.
Great. Yeah, that's helpful for me. Thanks, Claire. I think from my part, I think I just want us to be clear. If we're saying that Medicaid reimbursement isn't going to sustain, and that just connecting the 3rd and the 6th bullet point, 4th and 6th bullet point. So, we're saying Medicaid reimbursement isn't going to pay for this, and we want you to be sustainable, so they can make the ACT operation self-sustaining was 24 months. And so we want you to be sustainable within 2 years, and Medicaid reimbursement is too low. I just want to be very clear of what we are saying. Are we saying for the first 2 years of operations that we're going to be, whether that's, I heard someone talking about opioid settlement funds, are we as a municipality going to be helping any potential provider be in that time before they are self-sufficient, helping them with their operating costs for the first 24 months? I just want to be clear of what we are trying to say in the RFP. But otherwise, I don't have any particular concerns. Thanks.
Mr. Chair, may I add something?
Yes.
Thanks. I think it's important to acknowledge in the RFP that any proposals should call out whether or not there is a period of time in which they don't believe it would be self-sustaining, and to call out what contributions specifically it would look for in any kind of partnership. And if we have that, then when the proposals come in, the evaluation committee can look at that, look at the reality and how realistic it is to possibly find and identify potential funding sources to fill that gap. Just as a brief reminder, in the original alcohol tax, the first year it went forward, we had a $500,000 placeholder to help subsidize or start up the Alaska Center for Treatment Operations. And it subsequently went away because that didn't get going. But I think, and maybe it doesn't go in the results, but maybe it is somewhere in the context here that we need to know that, especially since the RFI responses have been clear that no one appears to be saying we can make this go on our own as a concern, and that we're open to the idea of a public-private partnership so that we can actually get bid responses. Thanks.
Yeah, if I could just close the loop, Mr. Chair, on this.
Yep.
I appreciate that. Then I would like us to be very explicit in whatever language is crafted for this resolution that may or may not in some form go in the RFP, that really we're asking for a funding stack from everyone. And if that funding stack includes you need help or you're looking for funding from the municipality or from other third parties to help complete your funding stacks, then that needs to be explicit in whatever you submit to the municipality. So I think the more that we can nudge people to say those things, the better. Thanks.
Thanks. I don't see any other questions on that one. I will just add a couple of notes for myself. I would agree with Mr. Rivera that I think the language is confusing because it's resolved to, and then it's sort of providing information about as opposed to direction. Or so that's, I think that the last few bullets confused me because I'm wondering whether this is just general information we are providing that is helpful, or whether it's actually giving direction of what to do. So that, like, for instance, the Medicaid reimbursement is too low to sustain services. Is that direction, or is that just FYI?
That whole section is FYI. None of that is actually the language of the AR.
Right.
I should have put it all in italics.
Yeah.
So what I wrote is, in section 1, the assembly should list appropriate and realistic guidance on the RFP. And then I just included what the RFI was, so you would have some background, some ideas of what you might want to include.
Yeah.
So you don't have to include any of that. I think I'm getting direction on bullets 3 to write it in a way that they would be resolves, and then to write at least a 4th bullet talking about the funding stack and the funding issue.
Great. Yeah. And I think that's where, similar to Mr. Rivera, I was trying to interpret it as what would be the direction there. And I think there's direction around concern around sustainability and those kinds of things. Ms. Brawley.
Yeah, in that spirit, another idea just to put on the table for other members to respond to is, so I believe it's marijuana licenses require a good neighbor agreement in code. Our shelter licensing system does. And I say those not because those are the same type of use as this, but is just as an idea. Do we want to put in this resolution the policy guidance that the operators should be required to execute a good neighbor agreement? And I don't know how I feel about that one, just putting it on the table for discussion.
Okay. Do you have anything else you would like to add on that before we move on to the next topic?
No.
No. Okay, great. Yes.
Mr. President, quickly,
Yes,
just on
Mr.
the
Consul.
note of the good neighbor agreement. I think that we have to be careful with that. If housing does get established in this place, there are fair housing rules that make those kind of policies challenging. So not impossible, but just it's sensitive when housing is involved.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Okay, let's move on to the second topic for the health department.
All right, so let me get my stuff out. Sorry about that. So this next topic I wanted to bring to your attention and get some feedback on, which is animal care and controls weather safety tool. And so that should be attached online. It's a document that has about a couple colors on it. Looks like this if you're in the room. And I just wanted to provide some background on it. And then if there is feedback that to just get with, to email me so that we can kind of get this moving. So some background on this weather safety tool, the Animal Control Advisory Board, which is staffed by the Anchorage Health Department, developed this in response to a work session back in March earlier of this year, where there was some discussions in regards to AMC 8.55.015, which is animal neglect.
Can I pause you just for a second? I'm just looking online. I want to make sure that, do we have this? You just found it. Okay. And you're going to post it on the, let's say, so those are for you, for those of you listening, we'll have it up on the website soon.
Sorry. Thank you. So the tool is really meant to assist APD and animal control officers in assessing animals that are left in vehicles during inclement weather. And so just making a notation that APD enforces AMC 8.55, which is animal neglect. And some officers don't have as much training or experience with animals. So really this weather tool is designed for anyone, regardless of training, to use and assist in their decision making. It was adapted for Alaska specific conditions from a nationally recognized weather safety scale, which is the Tufts Animal Condition and Care. Officers use the temperature, size, type of dog, and other factors, such as if the dog is dressed in cold weather gear, to come up with a risk score that can help them assess what next steps are needed. The tool has been tested by APD and animal control officers, and the feedback has been helpful for those that are in the field. And so, again, really what I wanted to do is just bring this to your attention. The Animal Control Advisory Board did put together a statement that went with this. So I believe that the process for getting those in front of you as the body is to present that through an AIM, which is why I also brought it up today. And so again, just providing any feedback that you have for the health department that we can then work with the contractor and our APD partners on this weather safety tool. But we think it's just another tool in the toolbox to really help those officers in the both on animal control as well as APD.
Thank you. Just I don't see another question. A couple questions for me. So this is a tool to be used by APD in making decisions about what? What would they be making decisions about?
Yeah, great question. So it'd be used by APD and animal control officers.
And
So
animal control,
APD, sorry.
Oh, please go ahead.
So really what it is that APD can only enforce 8.55 animal neglect, not animal control officers. And so animal control officers cannot remove animals in unsafe situations. And so really it's helping APD officers make that determination if an animal needs to be removed and if cruelty or neglect charges should be made. So it's either left in cold or hot vehicles. And then only APD can charge people with animal cruelty and neglect, and then have the animal seized and put into protective custody pending the outcome of a criminal case.
Interesting. I don't see any questions on that, and it's the intention, your intention that maybe this would be brought forward by an AIM.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Great. Okay. If you have to work with you on that. So, okay, great. It doesn't look like we have any other questions for you. Thank you for your time today. Okay, we're gonna next have Anchorage Police Department come up, please. Hi, welcome.
Thank you.
There's one topic on here. Maybe you can explain it, but police accountability and transparency, and then you have a sub AI in writing police reports. Is that the main topic you're going to talk about today?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I think the accountability and transparency piece maybe leaves the door open just slightly so I can
Okay,
provide a little more information.
great.
That won't
Yeah.
take long.
Okay, no, I want to make sure we have a full update. I think also just to the degree you can, based on the last meeting we had, this is a special meeting, and the meeting prior to that, any updates you can give in terms of the work you're doing related to the press conference and the plan that you and the mayor have come up with in terms of steps forward. So thanks.
Absolutely. I'll start with the report writing artificial intelligence assist, if you will. We're in week 2 of testing. And so we're starting to use that in the field on those incidents that will have very little impact on like criminal cases and stuff like that as we start to work through this 3-month process. So starting slow and working our way up, working with the district attorney's office, the municipal prosecutor's office. And next week, we will start also working with the public defender's office as well. So we make sure that all the legal entities we're touching base with so that we get the concerns out of the way prior to having impacting cases. And so I'll continue to update on what that looks like as we spend more time in the field.
I do have a question on that. I guess because AI is relatively new, I think for a lot of folks, can you remind us how this works? My memory was that this works with the existing technology that you have to compile all of the information that's been recorded on these video and create a report from that. Is that correct?
Kind of.
Okay.
So it's not creative. Like most of us think of AI generated documents as there's a creative piece. This is not a creative piece, and it has nothing to do with the video. It's the audio. So think of it as a high powered software to take the audio that's used and then put that information into a police report. And then officers aren't allowed to use that until not only they proof it, but there's certain areas of the report that automatically requires them to go in and provide more detail and ensure that the information is in fact what they saw, heard, and viewed. And then they can use that and put that in the actual police report.
And is there any concern that I guess the concern that I would initially feel is what if a computer program is making choices as to what to put in the report, as to what to how to compile it, and I guess that's a question: is the how much we can trust that in terms of its accuracy and whether it's actually pulling all the information or whether it's taking liberty to compile it in a particular way. And I guess that's just a question I have in terms of the software program and how it's built and how we can be sure that it is providing accurate representation of the audio tape.
So think of it as a transcription service. It's taking just the audio and applying that to a police report. And things that are inaudible or that the cameras and the audio can't capture, it will prompt the officer that something's inaudible, or and it will require the officer to address those issues. As we move through this process, I would say probably a month or so into it, once we've tested it out enough to where we kind of understand the software a little bit better, this is something that we will prepare like public available demos. I mean, there's not a secret behind this. It is producing a public facing document in terms of a police report. So we'll provide some demonstrations on how exactly it's working so people can see the interaction that we watch on the video and the words that are spoken, and then how that translates into an actual police report. So there's no mystery.
Got it. So the final report will be a combination of the information that was collected through this service and then what the officer themselves have added to that. Is that fair?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Yep. You want to ask a question? No? Okay. Miss Raleigh.
Yeah, I guess just echoing some concerns here. So I appreciate you breaking down how it's going to be used. I will note we've heard, generally There are issues like hallucinations, right, or presenting incorrect information. And I know it sounds like a lot of that comes from AI generated content, but I just want to express a concern about that, especially if something is misheard. And I say that because I've seen AI generated captions on videos, for example, just on YouTube, things like that. And routinely there are errors, either, proper names or just, it happens because it's hard to hear it. And I know that artificial intelligence still needs to be trained to do that, but that's a concern. The other question I had was, is this a cloud-based service? Like basically, are we giving confidential or named individual information to a cloud service by using this AI service, or is it disconnected from the cloud? How does it work?
The text is put in a software program that once it is put into a police report, then it's not stored on the cloud anymore. It's not stored on the cloud at all. So the officer starts the report writing process where the software takes the audio and creates the report, and then the officers have to go into that piece of technology and address the issues with, like, if it's inaudible, things like those. And as soon as then the officer takes that text and cut and paste it essentially into the police report, it's gone. So it's never stored anywhere but the police report.
Yeah, I appreciate that because it sounds more like a fancier speech to text thing that's been around, but is smarter than it used to be. Yeah, because again, I just want to register that I know these technologies are useful, but basically all of us are giving millions of unit you want to use of content or data to companies that are profiting off of it, right? So I think that's just important to keep in mind. So I appreciate that this is disconnected from that feedback loop. Thanks.
Thanks. A couple other questions, Mr. Rivera.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe you stated this already and I missed it. What's the software that APD is considering?
It's Axon. It's with our body camera provider.
Okay. Got it. And what's the percent accuracy that the Axon software has? Do you know that off the top of your head?
I don't know that off the top of my head.
And then I guess I do have a little bit of a question about usage of this in a police report and how that connects to an eventual possible prosecution and leading to an arrest, leading to a court trial. Is this something that our court system has prepared for of AI in this manner?
So in terms of prepared for it, this is all going to be reported in a police report. And the steps that we've taken so far is when we've met with, like particularly the district attorney's office, we met with not only them and the attorneys, but also the legal team from Axon to provide that explanation to talk kind of attorney to attorney. And as we move through this process, it's going to be a pretty significant cost benefit analysis, like the time it saves officers writing police report and the cost of the actual service and how much we're going to use it for. So as we go through this process, if there's concerns with the court system or with the prosecutors, and we decide, well, we're going to cut out all felonies, or we're going to cut out, a portion of what we use this system for, then we need to make the determination if it's still worth the cost to cut down on some of the report writing time. So all of this information, we will continue to keep this body updated so that we can have an interactive process to see if we really want to spend public funds for this.
Okay, so it sounds like this is a developing conversation. Do you have a timeline for when you might pull the trigger and ask? I assume this is something that you're going to eventually ask the assembly to appropriate funds to do. If I'm wrong on that assumption, please let me know. But do you have a timeline on when you might make that ask?
Yes, we have a 90-day test contract with Axon. We're in week 2 of that contract. And once we get to about day 30 is when we're going to have kind of enough data points where we'll be able to start discussing the details and how we want to move forward with the last 60 days of the contract.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Constant?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks. Hi, Chief. My questions are kind of along the lines of where Felix's questions were, but I think I'll be a little more pointed on one part. So imagine there is a report that's deficient in some way, and we have AI as a partial author, and we have the officer as the partial author, and that's going to the court system. Where does the liability lie for a report that's inaccurate? Is it on the officer or on the AI, and how do we manage that? And ultimately, the question is not to you and how we would do this. How is it being done where this is implemented?
So the liability always is on the officer. They're the ones that are pasting this information into the document. They're addressing the areas within the AI generated report that needs clarification. They are required to read the entire document through and sign the police report electronically that all of this information is their correct information, even though some of it was produced through the Axon AI generated reporting. So ultimately, if this information is incorrect, it falls on them.
All right, and I would love at some point in the not too distant future, kind of a understanding from your end how this is being implemented across the country.
Absolutely.
I'd love Ms. Carter to weigh in a little bit in the liability for the municipality, and in terms of, I guess I want to push back on that a moment and say that if we as a municipality approve and implement a system that is involved in creating these reports, and it's proven that in the report the error came from the system and not the officer. Is there a risk to the municipality? I mean, I would love to hear you speak to that, but you said it matter of factly that it's the responsibility is on the officer. But if we put in a system that is involved in generating the content for a police report, it would seem that there's some potential risk to those that put that system in place, or the creators of that system, or so something beyond the person. So if you could just share your name for the record and share your answer. Oh, and it's underneath. It's got to be turned on. Little button under there.
Thank you. I think it would, the level of risk would, well, the risk would be there, but the impact of the risk would depend on how big the mistake is and what it is. And in a court context, right, you always need to authenticate your documentary evidence. You always need to have a person corroborating, authenticating both the process that was used to create something as well as the contents. So if it is a minor mistake that gets caught in that process, in court, and it can be explained, then I would say there's not much harm in it. If it's a major mistake, hopefully if it's something major, then it would have gotten caught in the human review. But if there is a major error that didn't get caught in the human review when the report was being prepared and finalized, then that would be something to address with the court at that time. But I would say we use a lot of technological systems in our lives, in our work all the time, and there's always a risk of error. There's also a risk of human error as well. So.
Yeah, thanks. Looks like I have a comment from Mr. Rivera. I would just close that by saying, I think that this feels a little different because this is a program that is actually, it feels in some way like, even though we're saying that it's a dictation service, in some ways it does feel like it's actually creating content. And so it feels different than something that would simply be a tool that would be manipulating our own content. So that's where the debate, I think, is at what point does it have its own ability to create versus just replicate what we're doing. Mr. Rivera, did you have a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess just a brief final comment as I've been briefly thinking about this, and obviously I'll think about this more after this meeting. But just to put it on the record, speaking, of course, for myself, I am coming at this conversation with a high degree of skepticism. I think in large part because some of the things that other members have talked about, particularly Member Brawley, but also there is really, there are so many holes in this conversation for me. So I hope that we will continue to have this conversation and really understand before this is fully implemented in the community. I appreciate that there's a sort of a trial run going right now. Before this is fully implemented, though, I hope that we'll be able to come back to this and have a much fuller dialogue about the accuracy rates, how AI like this deals with other languages, a lot of different parts and pieces, I think, to be discussed in the whole before I feel comfortable even having a vote on a appropriation. So all that to say is hopefully a lot more conversation happening in the future. Thank you.
Thanks. And it sounds like that it's your intention to bring, as you learn more about this pilot, that it's your intention to bring that to this committee and share the information you've learned.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's move on to the broader topic of police accountability and transparency. And I don't know if you have specific things that you're hoping to share, but certainly there were some very specific plans that I think you were in the past have reported on that you were planning on working on, and would love an update on those specific areas, and then any other area you'd like to share.
Sure. I'll start with a little bit of a technology piece because I think that's always helpful when we talk about transparency. We will start testing redaction software for body cam footage here in the next couple of weeks. And the challenge with our current redaction software, we have 2 different redaction softwares right now, is it's still very, very time consuming. So the speed at which we can put videos out, and whether it's a public records request or any of our officer involved shooting videos is very, very, very time consuming. So we'll be looking to speed that up. We are also, hopefully by the end of the year, we'll be testing some new less than lethal technology as well that will provide a greater distance between officer and somebody that's posing a threat. So that will reduce the likelihood of having to use lethal force. So there's some new stuff out on the market, and when we get closer to that testing period, I'll provide that update and information to this body so they can be aware of it. And then we have started the internal review process of our academy training topics and how that curriculum is provided to not only our recruits in the academy, but also in our in-service training modules. And so that is occurring outside of what eventually will be an RFP for the training review that the municipal attorney's office is running point on. Because obviously we've been looking in this for the last 2 months. And so we're going to start moving forward and not have to wait for that full report to come back, although we will obviously take the recommendations and work through those as well. But we just want to let the body know that we are actively reviewing our training and starting to make changes that we should see. Well, not should, we will see some of them impact the December academy.
Let's see. Do you want to, Ms. Carter, do you want to give us an update on the external evaluation process and where we are with that?
Of course, thank you. So there were 2 external investigations that were announced. One is an outside investigation of what would normally be an internal affairs investigation. That's typically the internal disciplinary APD process that follows receipt of either a declination letter or, in some cases, a conviction. So for that, we're using the open market process, procurement process. We have solicitations out, and we are waiting for bids right now. And on that, in terms of who that was sent to, and who that will be awarded to, our qualifications are bidders must have familiarity with use of force principles experience performing police internal affairs and use of force investigations, and a balanced history of findings both for and against officers in use of force situations. So the goal there is to get somebody with the right type of experience who understands these principles, has done this before, but who has not, always found one way or the other. So we're hoping to have a contractor lined up for that within the next couple of weeks, and I will be very happy to report who that is publicly once we have that, although the investigation itself as an internal disciplinary thing is not at this time contemplated to be public as a personnel issue. For the second one, and this is the larger, what we're talking about is a policy audit or a policy review. This would be, and we're going to do it through the RFP process. So we're working on that right now. I'll work with the chief and with purchasing to draft the scope of work, and we should have that up as soon as we can have that up. And that will be open for public bid. And again, we'll come to you and share information on once that is going up so that anyone out in the community, you can provide that information to anyone who might want to bid. And that will be a broader policy review of all of APD's, use of force and de-escalation policies, practice, training, all that. So that one is still the scope of work on that, and the RFP materials are still being put together.
Okay, and I do have a question for you, but I just want to ask a couple clarifying questions real quick. So I want to be really clear about what these two are. The first one is a specific external investigation into, and you said internal affairs. Is it this particular this most recent case specifically, or is a broader internal affairs in general?
Yes, I apologize for not being clear on that. That would be specifically looking into the August 13th incident involving Easter Leafa.
Okay, so that is an external evaluation of that particular case. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and then the second is, and you called it a policy audit, and is the scope of that, when I think of policy, I think of things written down on paper. Can you give us a bit of a scope of that? My understanding originally was that it was an opportunity for us to learn more about sort of the internal functioning of the department related to officer-involved shootings and de-escalation and that sort of thing, and that it was broader than just a review of their policies, but it was it would give us an understanding whether there's opportunities for the department to improve in a variety of areas, and give us information that would be helpful sort of in a broad sense. So maybe you could be more clear about that.
Yes, absolutely. And so the purpose of the second broader, what I call the policy audit, is to take an outside close look at APD's use of force and de-escalation policies, see where they stand now, see where they can be improved to reduce the incidence of officer-involved shootings. And so the goal there is to see, are there more tools, right, that officers could have in their toolbox? Are there ways that APD could increase training or modify policies to, again, equip officers better to deal with situations? And so that it won't be just limited to looking at written policies, and the chief can speak more to exactly what all the pieces of things that go into this would look like. And again, we're working on the scope of work right now, but it would be looking at, my understanding is, policies, procedures, training, actual training, hours of training materials, training videos. So look at all of those pieces, sort of all the inputs that an officer gets that affect the decision to use force or not use force in a situation.
Anything to add to that?
And I think that covers it.
Okay, great. Ms. Raleigh, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks for the updates. So there's been a lot of talk about civilian oversight boards, right? And so setting that conversation aside, has the administration considered or started thinking about basically a more permanent version of an external review? Not meaning the civilian oversight version, but specifically like you're describing this contractor. And I'm not even necessarily saying it would be a contractor long-term. It could be an office, I suppose, instead of basically, or in addition to having internal affairs for future officer-involved shootings or situations like this that we've been talking about.
I think the plan, at least from my perspective, is that like some of the training review, the policy review, regardless of officer-involved shootings or any high-profile incidents. That is something that I always plan on continuously monitoring, review, and then reporting that information to whether it's this committee or work sessions, depending on what the subject is. Anytime you have an external review, the qualifications for somebody to come in and do those reviews, they have to have experience and knowledge. And so to continually produce that over and over again, that means that there's going to have to be a significant municipal investment in having like an entity that is continuously doing those types of things. A lot of these reviews you'll see around the country when you do a policy review or you do a training review. Generally, those last a couple of years, and then you have to kind of start that process over again to make sure that there aren't any change in either statutes or federal or state cases and things like that that have impacted it, or there's been an adverse reaction. So let's assume we changed some of our training as it related to defensive tactics, and we implement that strategy, and 2 or 3 years later, we want to look at that again to make sure there aren't injuries that have increased to either the officers or the public. And then you kind of start that process over again. And that's generally best practice on how to assess the department and its progress.
Yeah, thanks. And I do recognize that would be, there would be a cost to that, and it would take time to figure out. I guess I just, again, want to say, we're all struggling with that. A lot of people are frustrated with the way things are now. I know there are steps being taken. Some of that is basically reactive, which probably is the best case scenario in terms of trying to get somewhere. But I think we're all just, I think, trying to figure out how to get to a place of more community trust. And then there is, a significant segment of the community who says it needs to be external, regardless of what that looks like. So just putting that on the record as a conversation to continue. Thanks.
Just one final comment from me on this. So the second, policy training review, the product of that will be a public report with potentially recommendations about things that could be done differently. And I think that baked into that, we don't want this report to be issued and then stuck in a drawer somewhere and never looked at again. So I think that there would be a commitment to following through to making sure that any recommendations were followed and monitoring how that goes.
Thanks. And so I learn by listening and talking, so I'm going to kind of review what I heard, so make sure we're on the same page. So there is a request for proposals going out for an external investigator, evaluator, specifically on the one case, correct? And then there will be a request for someone to come in and do a more comprehensive sort of review of internal policies and training and a variety of things. Scope of that is being created. I think just to add to Ms. Brawley and Chief Case, it sounds like it may even be best practice for that to happen. It takes a while for that to happen. Get the results of that, make that public, talk about how we're going to change or improve whatever the recommendations are, and then at some natural sort of time that may happen again, right? So that may be something every 2 years or 5 years or whatever it is that is a normal sort of routine. That would be a healthy thing for any police department to do, to have an external person come in and give them that kind of evaluation. So that's great to hear, and looking forward to hearing more about that. And then Chief, you're doing your own internal review of policies and tactics and training and that sort of thing, to sort of preempt this external one, so that you're already doing it yourself. So when they come on, you'll already be looking at those things. Does that all sound correct?
That's correct.
Okay, great. I want to make sure I got it all right. Okay. And so I have a couple of just pieces to add before you leave, but anything else that you want to share? Any other updates you'd like to share for the committee? Okay. So just a couple of updates that relate to this. At a previous meeting, I had announced that we are going to put together a planning group to look at the next iteration of the public safety commission, and we're currently working on that timeline and who's involved in that and then that planning. So there will be an update coming out soon on sort of where that's going and what the time frame is. My understanding is that Ms. Brawley, Mr. Rivera, and myself have all agreed to participate in that, and so more to come soon on the next steps. The second update I wanted to share is that at a previous meeting, I had announced that we were going to hold a community conversation, and that was going to be an opportunity for the community to come out and to share their ideas and concerns around the recent officer-involved shootings and concerns around relationship with our public safety, et cetera. We, following that announcement, learned that the Alaska Coalition for Justice plans on holding their own community conversation, and that's going to be on September 10th. It's going to be at the St. Mary's Episcopal Church from 6 to 10. So what we've done is actually taken a step back and said we don't need to do it. We don't need to do our own if they're going to do theirs. And so we encourage the public to come out and to participate in that. My understanding is that there's been an invitation for members of the administration to come, and so we encourage folks to go and attend that. So those are just two announcements I wanted to share. Anything else from you guys? I think, yes.
One
Scarlett.
comment on that event,
Yes.
I noticed it is during an assembly meeting.
It is,
So
yes.
that may.
Yeah. Yep,
impact
thank
participation.
you for pointing that out. Yeah, so members of the assembly will unlikely be able to attend because of the timing of it, but we do encourage the community to participate, and any other people from the administration who's able to be there. Okay, thanks. Okay, let's move on. I don't have areas here, but I would like to create a space for the different departments to come up and give any update you want. Chief Carl. Chief Schrage, would you like to come up and give any updates you'd like? Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Chief Schrage from the Anchorage Fire Department. I wasn't asked to prepare any particular topics for the agenda, and I don't have a prepared report, but I would like to share some findings that we made just in the past few days. We've been looking at our call volume, and I would like to report that I think it's probably well known that our EMS call volume is increasing. I won't say exponentially, but at a high rate. For example, our ambulance calls year to date in 2024 is over 4% higher than it was for the entire year of 2023, and almost 13% up year to date this year, almost 13% up over the previous year, 2022. And this trend goes all the way back with a couple of little wobbles all the way back to 2019. So our call volume is increasing on average about 10 or more % per year in EMS. The same holds true for our transports. This is beginning to show signs of strain on our EMS system. It's exacerbated a little bit by the fact that our fleet is overaged, and we do have equipment that's on order, but supply chain issues has delayed the construction and delivery of our rolling stock. So all of this is coming together to create this perfect storm. There's been no degradation of service. We are maintaining our ability to get to all emergencies, but the signs are there that the system is under strain. And I will take any questions.
Thanks. Do you have any sense of why the call volume has increased?
I can speculate a little bit. I don't really know. We do know that calls for there's an increasing number of people who are relying on the 911 system for primary care. We know that the number of clients that we serve for non-medical conditions such as intoxication, overdose, and general mental unwellness has been increasing. pretty much since the pandemic. And I don't know why else that might be.
Yes, Ms. Brawley.
Yeah, so I know most of your service calls at this, it's a lot more medical than fire. I know that's known overall, and you're obviously talking about medical, you're not sending an ambulance to to fires generally. To what extent is it, I guess, are there more, I guess, physical conditions like heart attacks or things like that where there does need to be that emergency response, or are you saying that almost all the growth is in more the kind of mental health crisis space, or is it both?
Thank you, Member Brawley. Through the chair, all of our incident types are increasing, but I think, and I probably can back this up, but I don't know for sure. I think that the proportion of those calls that are related to unhoused individuals, people who are suffering behavioral crises, is a growing component of those calls.
And I guess just to be more specific, I don't want to conflate all unhoused individuals with all mental health calls. So is there a greater proportion of folks with housing who are also experiencing mental health calls? Like, is it, and maybe some more data would be helpful, actually, would be looking at, age cohorts or demographics, because obviously as people age, they have more medical emergencies, generally speaking. I just want to make sure that we're looking at that and not coming to some conclusion that it's some small population that's driving all of it, unless that's what the data is actually showing.
Sure. And may I respond through the chair? Member Brawley. Yes. I don't know that we would have the data to support that just now, because since the inception of the 24-hour service of the mobile crisis team, 3 days per week, what we have discovered just in the few months that we've been doing that is we've discovered that there's demand for those services around the clock. And the MCT is not primarily serving unhoused individuals. They are primarily serving people who have homes and live in residences. So I don't, it's been such a short amount of time that I don't think that we could demonstrate the answer to the question that you're asking.
Just a clarifying question, when you're saying calls, that includes the MCT. You're including that in this call volume?
I am, the general increases does not include the MCT calls.
Does not include.
Correct.
Okay, thanks. I want to make sure I understood that. Okay, I don't see any other questions for you. I would just note that a little change in our process is that we previously had pre-meetings to prepare agenda items, and one of the things that I'm hoping for now is that as we're going to send out reminders each month that we're going to have the meeting, and then if there are agenda items that you feel like are really important for the committee, that we would ask you to share those in advance of the meeting. So we'll continue to do that, to send out those reminders and share if there's anything that you feel like is really relevant and important for the committee to be working on.
Yes, sir.
Cool. Thanks. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
On up. Ms. Gardner, do you want to prior to do you have any other updates you'd like to share as well?
I can provide a short update on
Okay,
prosecution.
that'd be
if
great.
You'd like me to?
Yeah, please. Oh, it's okay. No. You're good.
All right, so I have mainly two things to report from the prosecutor's office. First is that we will have a new municipal prosecutor, Dennis Wheeler, who is returning to the municipality. He's a former municipal attorney who served from 2009 to 2015. And he will be in the municipal prosecutor role for about 6 months. And then he will move upstairs to civil. That is our plan, to be a civil attorney. But he has a very good reputation as a manager and a great boss. And so our hope with Mr. Wheeler is that he will come in and really be able to devote the administrative attention that office needs to that office. So help them with their recruitment and retention issues and really just focus on getting them running again. And we're working on our recruiting push now, trying to hire to fill the remaining vacancies. And also taking some other measures to kind of stabilize the office in long term. At the last meeting, I think Member Perez-Verdier, you'd asked me about the body cam footage technology issue, and I did not know about it at that time. I can now report it is an issue. When APD switched to the Axon system and started getting the footage, in place. They had the technology and the ability to do it, but the municipal prosecutor's office got a little bit left behind. So when Mr. Wheeler comes in early October, that's going to be one thing that is high on his priority list to look into that and propose solutions. And otherwise, until he gets here, I'm planning to spend more time than usual with prosecution and listening to them, finding out what the issues are in the office and working with them to come up with some proposed solutions so that Mr. Wheeler can hit the ground running.
When do you expect him to start? Sorry.
Early October.
Okay, great. If we could, it'd be lovely to have him come to the committee as well. Thanks. Okay. All right, Officer of Emergency Management.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Amanda Loach. I'm the director at the Office of Emergency Management. Just a very brief report for you this month. I just wanted to say thank you again for the resolution for National Preparedness Month, the entire month of September. We appreciate that. No changes on our other items that we reported out on last month. A $400,000 grant for mitigation and fire risk analysis should be on its way to you. And also a earthquake, Point McKenzie 2018 earthquake appropriation. That should be on its way as well. Both of those are experiencing a little bit delay, but you should see those coming to your queue for an assembly meeting in the next 1 or 2 meetings. And then looking forward, OEM has submitted our recommendations for the 2025 budget to the mayor, and also a proposal for a capital improvement project through M&O, through maintenance and operation. So we're standing by for deliberation on that by the mayor. Any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thanks very much. Doesn't look like you have any questions.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here today. I appreciate it. Okay, we have a little bit of time left over for audience participation. If we have, do we have anybody in the room who would like to speak? Doesn't look like we do. Wonderful. Do we have anybody on the phone? Okay. Well, seeing no additional business, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you for being here today.